Okay, welcome everyone to Changing the Game, the Future of PE webinar. So my name is Anthony Sheriff. I'm a PE lecturer in Portobello Institute, and today I'm going to actually be joined by a fellow PE lecturer in Portobello Institute, Barry Rowe, and our guest speaker is going to be Dr. Orla Farmer, who just has an extensive experience in all things PE and physical activity. So in a few moments, what I'm going to do is going to bring Barry and Orla in, and they can give a bit of a background on themselves and their experiences with PE and physical activity as well. So before we meet Barry and Orla, first of all, thanks everyone as well for coming and for logging in. But before we bring the two guys in, what I'd like to do is just give a little bit of a rundown on what we're actually going to be talking about today. So we're going to be discussing all things PE really. So we're going to be discussing our own personal journeys and our own personal experiences of PE and teaching PE, whether it be in schools or delivering it to trainee PE teachers in college. We're going to be discussing how COVID has also affected delivering PE, because I'm sure COVID has obviously affected delivering every subject, but just the very physical nature of PE meant that was quite challenging to deliver, physical activity modules in third level as well. We'll be discussing PE in Ireland, so how that looks in comparison to PE in other countries, and we're also going to be discussing maybe the future of PE in Ireland as well and how that might change over the coming years. What we'll also be discussing then, because I'm sure there's quite a lot of people here who are interested in starting a career in PE, so we're going to be looking at different pathways into teaching PE. So that like I said at the start, we'll all discuss our own journeys and our own histories and how we got into PE, but we'll also be discussing ways that you guys can get into PE as well, if that is something that you're interested in doing, and specifically as well what Portobello Institute can offer you if that is a route you're interested in going down. And then there'll also be lots more elements of PE that we'll be discussing as well. That's just a little bit of a brief whistle-stop tour of what we'll be talking about, but it will encompass an awful lot throughout the next hour or so. There is a chat box at the bottom, so if you have any questions at any stage, please do put in questions in the chat box, and at the end we will have a 10-15 minute period where we'll go through all the questions that come in and we'll answer each of them as well. So what we're going to do to start off with is just give a little bit of a background on ourselves personally and how we got into PE. So seeing as I'm warmed up talking, I'll actually just start. I'll just give a little bit of a history of myself with PE. So I actually didn't go to college straight from school. I was quite late into education, so I did my Leaving Cert when I was 17, 18, and I didn't actually go to college then until I was 22. So I went to Liverpool John Moores University where I studied PE because PE was really the only subject that I really, really loved in school. So although I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do when I left school, PE was the thing that was always there in my mind, that if I was ever to go to college, that is the area that I had most interest in. So the PE degree in Liverpool John Moores University was just absolutely outstanding. I was a bit apprehensive, obviously, because I had no experience of college, but the lecturers there and staff there were just so helpful. They put on a great course, great opportunities to go out on placement as well, where I worked in some schools, primary schools and secondary schools delivering PE. So once I finished that 3-year degree, I did my Pgce in the University of Chester, and I did that in primary education with PE specialism, which is a big difference between Ireland and the UK. So the UK has specialised primary school teachers, specialised PE primary school teachers. There's also some other countries that do that as well, but obviously Ireland don't do that at the moment, and maybe that's something that we'll discuss as we go on. I've also got some experience of teaching in Dubai as well as England and Ireland, so I've seen PE being delivered all around the world, and at the moment I'm lecturing, as I said at the start, I'm lecturing PE in Portobello Institute. So that's just a bit of a brief background on myself. So what I'm going to do at the moment is bring in Barry Rowe, who, as I said at the start, also works with me in Portobello Institute as a PE lecturer, and Barry will just give a bit of a brief background on himself and his own journey in PE as well.
Thanks very much, Anthony. Welcome, everybody. My name is Barry Rowe. It's a pleasure to be sitting here with you all this evening. And just a little bit about myself. I am the program lead for PE in Portobello Institute, and I also deliver on the PE modules. And in terms of my background, kind of similar to Anthony, I didn't have a clear run at it, where I actually studied in the UK also, but my undergrad was in marketing, and I graduated on the cusp of the recession, came back, and I ended up working in finance in Ireland for a number of years. And then I also worked in media for a number of years. But sport was always such a huge part of my life, and it was really a kind of an escape, and it was always something that I loved to be involved in. and not being too much of a fan of the office life, I ended up leaving my job and basically becoming a personal trainer, and then bolstering my qualifications by doing a master's in sports performance in the University of Limerick. And during my time there, I also had a fantastic experience working with Munster Rugby, with their age grade teams, as a strength and conditioning coach and nutrition advisor as well. And then after all of that, I completed my training in education, and also joined up with the Portobello Institute in 2018, working first of all on their coaching modules, but then transitioning into the PE department as well. And it's something I've always been really passionate about, because I've 2 kids myself, and I like to see what people are doing and what can be done, I suppose, to help children continue and develop in terms of their physical literacy, and also just their appreciation of being active. And it's something I feel is very important. I'm sure a lot of people here do as well. And so that's basically where I'm at now. And I'll just hand you back over to Anthony there.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Barry. So now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for today, which is Dr. Orla Farmer. So as I mentioned at the start, Orla has an extensive amount of experience in PE and physical activity. So she's a PE teacher, a lecturer. She has a PhD research in physical activity as well. She's also a Gaelic footballer for the Cork county team. So I could really introduce her for a long time. Like I said, her experience is huge. But I'll just hand straight over to Orla now to talk us through her experience at PE.
Thank you for that, Anthony. Absolutely delighted to be here with you tonight, and just to, I suppose, share some of my own insights from my own, research background, my own playing experience, and my own teaching experience as well. So just to give you kind of a brief synopsis, I actually I did the sports studies and physical education degree, my undergrad, in UCC. So, like Barry and like Anthony, ever since I was young, I've always had that just desire and passion to, love sport, love coaching, just always that kind of quest to gain knowledge and to kind of share knowledge, in terms of, wanting our children, people to be physically literate, and to get the best out of themselves, in terms of physical activity as well. So I suppose after my 4 years, I decided to go on and I do a PhD. So an opportunity kind of came to me with the Ladies Gaelic Football Association. So I've been playing with the Cork senior ladies footballers with the last 12 years now. I'm one of the oldies now at this stage, but I've really enjoyed the journey and love playing football. And I suppose the Ladies Gaelic Football Association came to me with kind of a proposition, and wondering would I be interested in, I suppose, looking at some research in Ladies Gaelic football and kind of developing the Gaelic for Girls programme, which I will speak a bit more about throughout this workshop as well. So really, I kind of never thought I would do a PhD, but because my passion and because my desire to kind of, empower others through the medium of sport, I decided to go on and do my PhD in UCC in the sports department, focusing on young girls' youth participation in physical activity, in sport, and I looked at the Gaelic for Girls programme. So really, my background is really strong in research and physical activity and sport, and I suppose the last few years I've kind of been combining my work in secondary school environment as a PE teacher, but also as a lecturer in Dundalk IT as well. So I lecture in the early years studies programme with Dundalk IT for physical activity and research-based modules as well. In my spare time then I play a bit of football, and I also I'm involved with coach education workshops with the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, and I suppose with Sport Ireland then I've been involved in national research projects, big studies such as the children's sport participation and physical activity study, and a physical literacy study as well, which will be coming out over the next year or two as well. So really I'm kind of just part and parcel of my life, sport, and that's just what I love doing. I love sharing and empowering my own knowledge and insights, so that teachers, parents, young children can benefit and get the most out of themselves.
Thanks, Orla. So for anyone logged in, I'm sure everyone can see that there's quite a lot of experience here in physical activity and physical education. So hopefully you'll all get something from this anyway. But I think a good place to start is with Orla, anyway, just to talk a little bit about your research, because you mentioned it there, but if you just talk a little bit more in depth about, first of all, what actually drew you to that research, and also can you tell us, just explain to us exactly what the research looked like?
Yeah. So I suppose looking at my own research project, it focuses on the Gaelic for Girls programme. So some of you might have heard of the Gaelic for Girls programme. It's actually an existing national run programme by the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, and it's been running since 2008. And I suppose the whole aim of the programme is to try and introduce young girls to ladies football and try and retain young girls in physical activity through the medium of sport and ladies football. So the programme has been quite actually successful over the last few years. However, there was no evidence base behind the programme. So I suppose where my research came in then was that I actually, have put that evidence base, that first evidence base really behind the Ladies Gaelic Football programme. So I looked at the programme, I went out to schools, I researched, why are girls playing, the motivators, the barriers, the factors that are influencing participation levels for young girls, because as we all know, there's such a high dropout rate, particularly kind of coming from pre-adolescence into adolescence. And it's a big worry, it's a big issue in Ireland and worldwide. And I suppose really, in terms of what drew me to the research, I suppose myself first-hand experience of playing as a young girl and experiencing my own friends in primary school dropping out of football, the same friends that had asked me to come and join my club in Middleton actually were the ones that dropped out 2 or 3 years later. And I suppose it always just kind of was at the back of my mind, why did they drop out? Why was I the one who stayed on? And that question always pondered. And I suppose with the high dropout rate as well, and with the lack of, I suppose, in-depth research in Ireland in terms of female youth sport participation, I decided to take on the PhD. So, all in all, it looked at, I suppose, physical activity levels, how physically active are young girls. So the age bracket was 8 to 12 years. So you're talking about kind of 2nd to 6th class girls in primary school. Looked at, the motivators, why they like sport, why they like ladies football, what's stopping them, the factors influencing them, but also looking at their skill level and their fundamental movement skill, proficiency, and how all of those areas could be improved in the programme to get more girls staying and playing involved in ladies football. So in a nutshell, that's essentially my PhD. I completed it last year, and it's really after opening my eyes to, I suppose, thinking outside the box a bit in terms of what we can do as educators, as parents, as teachers, as young children, to actually use these to our advantage in terms of skill competence, actually understanding why we're actually playing and why we're involved, and why young girls and young children are dropping out as well, so that we can put in place strategies, we can put in place interventions that can help retain young children, not only girls, because it's quite relevant to boys too, in place. So I suppose in terms of my research, I looked at the Gaelic for Girls intervention. So it was a 10-week programme, and for 1 hour a week, we went out to the clubs and we delivered a programme. So it was a station-based approach programme. So every 10 minutes, the girls moved on to the next station, and each station kind of focused on a different skill. And it was kind of that deliberate practice of, the basic fundamental movement skills. I introduced other areas then, such as a Gaelic for Girls kind of a dance, which I'll speak a bit about more in a while. And I suppose really just putting that evidence base there, so that not only in ladies Gaelic football, but, it can be used as a resource and, as interventions in a school setting, in a community-based setting as well as a home setting, to try and promote and encourage physical activity and sport participation among girls.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think your area of research is also very, very relevant to what we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of this webinar. So I'm sure we'll come back to this as we go on. But just to ask you, what were your main findings or main takeaways from the research that you did?
The findings are actually very interesting. I suppose in terms of physical activity, their levels were very, very low. So, I mean, you're talking about less than a third were kind of reporting to be, physically active for the 60 minutes. of moderate to vigorous physical activity, which, like, to one extent I wasn't really surprised because of the low levels of physical activity in Ireland, and that aligns with research that's done internationally as well. However, I suppose in that sense, because of those low levels, it kind of made you think, like, what has been done in schools, and where can we look at physical activity and how can we improve upon that. Another kind of key finding that came through was just the fundamental movement skills proficiency levels were really, really poor, quite shocking and worrying, really. In my own research, it was like less than 3% of the participants. Now, I assessed over kind of 600 girls in my 3-year studies in my PhD, and what was coming through in that research was that less than 3% of the girls were proficiently performing, like, in confidence, these basic skills. And by the age of 10, research would suggest that children should be competent and confident and have mastered these basic skills. So skills like running, skipping, hopping, jumping, kicking, catching, skills kind of that are very relevant to ladies football and that kind of Gaelic game setting. Very, very poor. Like, it really opened my eyes to even just observing them and assessing them. Like, skipping, the contralateral movement, kids couldn't get that rhythmic kind of movement. Bouncing a ball, like basic bouncing a ball, running technique, very, very poor. And again, that aligns with research that has been done in Ireland amongst primary school age children and adolescents as well. So really that was kind of the worrying finding that came through. And I suppose really then when we looked at the motivators and the barriers, the key things that were coming through was just that fun and enjoyment aspect, that, why are you playing? Why are you physically active? Why are you playing sport? Because I actually really like it, and I have fun with my friends. Now, fun can be quite an elusive kind of a concept as well, but I think it was more that sense of belonging, being part of a team, being that social aspect of being involved in sport. And that peer support came through a lot for girls, that, knowing that they were supported by their parents, knowing that they were supported by their peers, and knowing that they were supported by their teachers and by their coaches was one of the main reasons why they stayed involved. And contrary to that, on the other side, was one of the main reasons why girls were dropping out, because their coach was too strict. They weren't getting on with their friends were dropping out, and as a result then the girls dropped out of sport. And also other things like kind of confidence and competence, low confidence, body image, all of that can come into play for girls too. And I think one positive finding that came through was that of the power and impact of role models. And I think that's an important, I suppose, message for tonight's webinar as well, because as future PE teachers, as PE teachers, as lecturers, parents, whoever is tuned in, tonight, that like you don't realize the impact that you can have as a teacher, as an educator, in terms of positively influencing children. And like you could be the reason why a girl or a boy drops out of sport, of physical activity. You could be the reason why, they're not engaging in your PE class. Like you have that power and you have that positive influence. Like I can only speak for myself really, because when I was in 5th class in primary school, that's when my kind of love for sport started. And it was actually my 5th class teacher at the time who instilled that love for sport and for physical activity in me. And she actually encouraged me to join my local club in Middleton. And, had it not been for her, like, I don't know, would I be where I am now in terms of playing at a high level, in terms of actually, empowering others through the medium of sport. So like, it just goes to show, like, how many years later, I won't give away my age, but like that impact when I was 11 years of age, and still to this day, I appreciate that influence of that teacher. So, it's just, I suppose, like it does make sense, and, it's what's coming through. And at the end of the day, it's Irish girls are saying, these findings are coming through from research. So I suppose really what can we do as educators to try and take on board those findings and bring it into the school environment, into the community sport environment, so that we can inspire young girls to stay involved.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a really important message as well, and a message that we definitely want to get across this evening is the influence that PE teachers do have over young people. Like, you've just given some great examples there, and I'm sure we're going to talk more about this as we go on. So what we're actually going to do now is just move away from the research side of things a little bit and just bring it more into just general PE. So Barry, I will get to you later on, but I'm just going to stick with Orla for the moment. So Orla, just to give you a bit of a general question about PE, I'd just like to know, what do you actually enjoy most about teaching PE?
I think really it's that, knowing that you're actually positively influencing them, the benefits of PE, like not only just the physical benefits, the social, the emotional, the mental, like the spiritual, all those benefits that that's, for some, that might be that 60-minute class or that double or triple period might be the only time that the adolescents, the children are actually reaping benefits out of physical activity, and knowing that you have control over that class, and knowing that they're going to leave that class, the endorphins released, and it's positively influencing and benefiting them. And I think that's the most rewarding thing for me about teaching physical education and lecturing in third level, as well as that kind of knowing that the rewards and the benefits from physical activity, and inspiring them, because at the end of the day, if you're enthused about something, it's contagious. Enthusiasm is contagious, and knowing that you have that positive impact, I think for me definitely is the bonus for being a PE teacher.
Yeah, and just for anybody here, or that is actually thinking of going down the route of PE as a career, would you say, is there any misconceptions you found that people maybe think is going to be the case when they become a PE teacher, but then isn't actually the case? And also, what advice would you have for trainee PE teachers starting off on their journey?
I think in terms of like misconceptions, like just from my own experience, I suppose, like some people may deem kind of physical activity as like, a kind of almost like a rest period, or kind of like, sure, PE's a bit of a laugh kind of a thing. And some people, teachers, schools mightn't deem it as necessary for like the academic side as well. Now, obviously that has kind of changed in the last few years, thankfully, with the Leaving Cert curriculum, but just based on my own experience, like I remember when I was in my third year teaching practice and I was out in a school, and it just really took me by surprise when only the first years, the second years and the fourth years in the school actually did PE. And I was kind of thinking to myself, like, oh my God, only 3 out of the 6 years in the school actually are eligible to do PE, and we're allowed to do PE in the school. And I think, obviously things have changed in the last few years, thankfully, but I think sometimes, when you think of like PE, being a PE teacher, you think like, oh, it's all just about like fun and sport, and like you have to be sporty and you have to, be good at sport and all that. I think that's something that definitely I would think would be a misconception. But I think in terms of advice for kind of pre-service teachers, or maybe for people that want to go down that route, like I definitely think to really, if you're going out, even on placement as well, and if you're thinking about going to the course, that if you've any bit of passion, or if you've any bit of curiosity and you want to kind of improve your knowledge and improve that experience, definitely like engulf yourself in the school environment. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be too kind of bogged down on the lesson planning and stuff and the written side of it, because I think that's one of the mistakes I made when I went out on teaching practice. I was so up to 90 about my lesson plans, like spent hours trying to perfect the lesson plan, and then I'd be annoyed at myself when I was kind of saying, well, I didn't cover X, Y, and Z on the lesson plan. I should have covered X, Y, and Z. And that's not the reality really of teaching. That, it could look really, really well on paper, and you could have all these ideas and you could have all these, brilliant games and notions, but when you come and actually the reality of teaching a PE class, that you really just need to be adaptive to their needs at that time. And if you don't cover something on your lesson plan, like it's not the end of the world, and don't beat yourself up about it. I think that's definitely a big piece of advice that I would give for, prospective primary school teachers, PE teachers right now. And I think just to ask questions, like, and observe from the best and learn from the best. I think really just they're the main pieces of advice anyway that I would give.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So interesting points you made there as well about the misconceptions as well. I mean, I found that myself. I remember when I was in secondary school, quite a lot of the time our PE was basically the PE teacher would show us football, tell us to play a game of soccer, and he'd just sit down and relax. So I kind of thought, maybe the PE is just that. It's just a bit of fun, a bit of a break for a teacher. But I think with it coming into the leaving certain things like that, people are starting to cotton on that that's not the case at all. It actually is a very, very important subject, academically as well as physically. So I think you're dead right in that. Barry, just to jump back to you for a moment, what do you think the biggest challenge is that PE teachers face in trying to deliver a high standard of PE to everybody?
Well, first of all, I suppose just speaking to prospective students and speaking to schools as well, and PE teachers that I've had conversations with in the past, there's a few recurring themes, such as resources where the school might not have the budget or the equipment in order for a successful delivery of the program, and also then the facilities as well. In terms of infrastructure, there may be issues with that, or it might be lacking where they don't have the facilities to actually deliver an effective PE program, or perhaps the logistical elements where students may have to travel long distances to and from venues in order to actually take part in their PE program. And then the age-old issue of time, basically too little time to actually effectively deliver PE when you only have, say, 1 hour a week. And how do you really ensure that students are benefiting from that within that time frame? And also that time might be eaten into with, say, logistical elements like traveling to and from venues, or then also what you guys were talking about just there, perceptions, and not just perceptions from students, where students might not be too interested in PE, especially when, I suppose in my day, it was very, very much, and like you just said there, Anthony, a teacher might just chuck a ball in and tell you to play football. It might be very much focused on a specific discipline or sport that particular PE teacher or that teacher delivering the PE class might be more familiar and comfortable with delivering. So that might not appeal to every student as well. And then I suppose that touches on what Orla was saying as well, in terms of drop-off rates, when students don't feel like they can engage with it because it's very much focused on one area, or in particular areas that are of little or no interest to those students. So and then perceptions from parents and staff as well. So where staff might feel like they draw the short straw in delivering PE, and they might not be comfortable with it, or might not have much of an interest in it, which is, I can understand. But what we're hoping to see in the future is more of a focused delivery from qualified PE teachers who have a specific focus on delivering that curriculum. And then also with parents as well, you would hope that parents will be trying to, I don't know, encourage their children to take part in these activities and to be involved in, I suppose, not just within the school environment, but outside of school as well, trying to ensure that our children are engaged in a healthier lifestyle, because obviously there's issues at the moment, and we can see a lot of problems developing over the coming years if this isn't addressed adequately.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you just said there, Barry, you were mentioning about some children mightn't find it very appealing, that kind of competitive element of PE, almost, getting involved in games. Now, Orla, clearly you're somebody who thrives with competition, with the career you've had in football, but competitive PE could actually be a deterrent to an awful lot of young people. It's not something that they will be interested in, but that's not to say that they're not interested in physical activity. They might just not be interested in the competitive side of things. So how would you promote non-competitive PE in schools?
Yeah, I think competition can be, again, quite like an elusive term as well. It's quite broad in the sense of, like, I think it's important to be aware that some children and some adolescents actually, you think competition, and they use it as a motivating factor, and it's quite actually central to their learning experience as well. That, even just based on my own research and research that I've done in Ireland as well, that some students would even cite saying, like, but sure, it's fun to win. Like, it can be fun to win as well. And on the other side, I think for girls, from my own research anyway, particularly girls, it can act as a deterrent, and it can be a barrier, the too competitiveness side to it. So what we're seeing is that, girls can drop out when ironically the fun and enjoyment is stripped and it's almost too competitive for them, which again would have that knock-on effect on their confidence and their ability to actually engage in the task as well. So I suppose the main thing really as an educator, I think, is like, well, first of all, you need to get to know what your class are like and get to know, do they strive on competition? What are their personalities and how can you actually internally motivate them? But something that I've kind of, I suppose, implemented in the last few years is kind of that notion of like team competition, and that's kind of individual self competition as well, whereby, the focus isn't just on like the end goal or like winning the game or winning this and that, but it's kind of more whereby the effort and the reward is kind of used as an incentive as opposed to like the result and the outcome. So like something just coming to mind there was even in athletics, for example, I remember doing this kind of Olympic kind of points system whereby they were in their teams and they kind of all gained their Olympic points and their Olympic rings by actually effort. It was based on effort and the effort of tasks, and something like that can actually work in terms of kind of promoting that non-competitive environment because they're doing it for each other. Or you could look at it, I suppose, the kind of instructional models as well, when you look at the personal social responsibility model, whereby they're actually kind of looking at their own self-improvement. I know we used to give the students kind of their own booklets in athletics, and we used to do kind of monthly miles and stuff, and they used to kind of keep track of their own times and their own kind of distances, throwing distances, running distances, etc. And that kind of motivated them internally, and they felt part of the class. They felt engaged, they felt that kind of sense of ownership as well. So I think if you can kind of include elements of like autonomy and that relatedness and allow them to kind of feel autonomous and feel that they are taking control of their own competition or their own goal and tasks, I think that can actually go a long way too. And it has been very effective for me in terms of teaching and coaching as well, that kind of reward them by effort, and having that, I like to say it's appropriate kind of healthy competition, that it's not like too hard for them, that they feel that they have that sense of achievement, that they've actually achieved something, that you're not kind of setting the bar too high. So it's just about getting the balance between healthy kind of appropriate competition, I'd like to call it.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Interesting what you said there, as well, about when I mentioned being competitive, I suppose I was talking about competing against other people. But like you said there, you can adapt that in different ways, where they're almost competing against themselves. So that takes away that fear of looking silly or whatever the fear may be. They're just competing against themselves, and maybe that adds to the motivation as well. Guys, before we move on to the next topic, I just want to say, for anyone that's logged in, you can still put a comment into the chat there at any stage if you want to ask a question. And like I said at the start, we'll answer it at the very end. But what I'd like to do now is just move on to the next topic, which is something that's been obviously very relevant in the last 18 months, 2 years, whatever it's been now, which is COVID. Now, obviously, COVID in relation to PE in particular. So I think every subject has been affected through COVID, and we've had to adapt in our teaching, but definitely PE, us as PE lecturers as well, we've been teaching modules that rely very much on the physical side of things. So we've had to do a lot of this online, which has been very demanding and required an awful lot of thinking outside the box. So Barry, I'm going to go to you first for this one. How have you adapted to teaching PE modules online?
Well, I suppose unfortunately COVID-19 hit us all with a bang last year, and we had to very swiftly adapt and come up with new ways to deliver, but also in order to assess the practical components of the modules. And it was challenging at first, but I have to say the students really really went above and beyond and delivered. And basically what we looked at was moving all of our lectures to online delivery. And I have to say, admittedly, I was quite surprised because there was such a positive engagement from the students, and that really was a benefit and helped everybody to I suppose enjoy that collaborative learning experience that we brought from the lecture hall into the online platforms. And then in terms of practicals, we had some students say in an aquatics module, swimming in their kitchens on balancing on a chair. But what we would do, what I would say is, as funny as that might sound now, what it did was it gave the students an opportunity to deliver and practice their delivery in an online setting, or perhaps where you might not have a pool setting and you're trying to show people how to enter and exit a pool, or just going through simple things before you're actually in the water. And similarly, working on their communication skills in terms of coaching sense, how they would speak with an audience through their webcams, and also deliver a positive activity and an experience for those students. And in what I would say is it allowed students greater autonomy in how they structured their lesson planning, and it also helped them to develop their delivery skills in an online environment. And also that in turn, I found, helped to improve their communicative and technological skills, and just having an understanding of how to go about doing that, which is something that they might need in the future as well, dependent on where they're working, or perhaps if they want to go down different avenues, say in terms of remote coaching as well, because we've seen a lot of our PE students also have an interest in sport, obviously, but also some are currently involved in sport and may wish to go down the coaching route. And these are all tools that they'll have in their locker now as a consequence. It wasn't something that was planned, but it's something that they've definitely benefited from, and potentially opened up their reach to a larger audience as well. And from our own perspective, I'd say it also helped us to develop our communication skills and how to reach a larger audience as well.
Yeah, and I think I definitely agree with everything you said there. And I mean, if teaching people how to swim in their kitchen isn't thinking outside the box, I don't know what is. But same question to yourself, Orla. How have you adapted in these strange 18 months to teaching, modules online?
You said teaching swimming in your kitchen. I was doing animal yoga in my kitchen with my students. So if there's a will, there's a way. And yeah, I think, like, it was very, I suppose, unexpected, and it forced students to, I suppose, think outside the box. And like, to be honest, like from my own experience of teaching the practical classes with the Dundalk students, they took really, really well to it. And I think they actually felt a bit more comfortable in their own home setting too, because it kind of, sometimes students can be quite conscious in things of, other people in the class, and that kind of social comparison and stuff. I actually felt that they gained in a lot of confidence through the online delivery. And as Barry, like just even small things like that, I think made the difference. I suppose in terms of teaching PE, I wasn't teaching PE throughout the COVID pandemic in a secondary school environment, but something that I did decide to do last year at the start of 2020, really, it was March, April. I decided to run this kind of online challenge. It was kind of targeting young girls, really, just to try and keep up the kind of positive momentum of sport and physical activity, and to keep practicing the basic skills. So I developed this kind of, it was supposed to be only 1 week, and it actually took off then for about 8 weeks, and it was really positive. So the whole purpose of it was like each day was a different target. So we had Monday Fun Day, we had Target Tuesday, we had Workout Wednesday, we did a bit of Tai Chi on Thursday, so we had Tai Chi Thursdays, and we'd Fitness Fridays. So like even just something like, challenges, skill challenges, and doing something different, like a bit of Tai Chi and relaxation for well-being and mindfulness, it worked really, really well. And I think it's just important that, going forward, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of COVID, in terms of like how schools are going to work, etc. Things could change. So it's important to have that skill set and to have that confidence to actually say, look, well, I now have another platform whereby I can use that online presence, and I can use that to get more kids active and to try and empower others then to, I suppose, deliver physical activity sessions. So I think that's a positive, really, in terms of adapting to the whole kind of pandemic and things, that, look, it opens up new platforms and it opens up new avenues for physical activity and for sport as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing I would like to ask you, Orla, I think, in secondary schools, you've obviously got your qualified PE teachers, so they're more specialised. They've got probably better equipment, better spaces to deliver PE. But in primary schools, quite often the PE teacher, in all cases in Ireland, the PE teacher is your class teacher, so they just, take them out. It might at times even be seen as a little bit of a breather from the classroom. Now, in these times that we're living in now, in COVID, you might even see some primary school teachers maybe even feeling, a little bit, nervous about teaching PE, and it might be something that might get put on the back burner, which is obviously something that we can't necessarily afford to have happen. So what advice would you have for a primary school teacher that maybe is just lacking in confidence a little bit in terms of how they would deliver PE, in the kind of strange times, I suppose, that we are living in?
Absolutely. And as you said, it's that physical essence of PE, and it's that environment that you want to create, that kind of positive culture for them. To be honest, I think in terms of advice, I think less is more sometimes, and by actually just integrating kind of a fun environment with kind of socially stimulating activities, and having that kind of peer and social support, I think, to be honest, is less is more. And I think if you can get them active in whatever form, whether it be movement breaks, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to the hall. Like 9 times out of 10, it's going to be raining over the next few weeks in Ireland. So it's again that notion of thinking outside the box, and what can you do in the classroom, inside the school, if not outside the school, for that whatever, maybe 20-minute block, for that 60-minute block, and maximize that time. I think it's maximizing the participation, and how many times are they on their toes? Are you talking too much, as a PE teacher? Are you giving them too much time in between activities? It's if you have them for that hour, what are you doing in that hour to maximize their experience, so that they will want to come back, and they'll be enthused for the next PE session as well. At that age, to be honest, it should be all focused on fun and enjoyment, and practicing the deliberate practice of the basic fundamental movement skills. So those basic skills that they'll have mastered, if they can master them in primary school, and it's your job really as the primary school teacher to help that process, then you've your job done essentially, because they'll now have they'll now be physically illiterate, and that will help them progress on when they do move on to secondary school. And attitude, it's giving them that good attitude. I'm not saying you have to do unbelievable games and this and that. If they enjoy it, and if they feel good about being in the class, and if you're working on their basic skill, then 9 times out of 10 they'll be internally motivated to want to come back to do that PE class the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually going to stay with primary schools at the moment. We're going to move on to just talking about PE in Ireland now specifically, but we'll start off with primary schools and we move on then to secondary schools. Now, I mentioned at the start how I worked in England, and England have PE specialists working in primary schools, which isn't something we have in Ireland. So I've seen it firsthand. I've seen, a school would have one PE teacher, and that PE teacher would work with every class in that primary school. He'd take them out, he or she would take them out. And from my own experience, I've seen there's a big focus on, you mentioned there about fundamental movement skills, really developing them to a high standard, implementing activities like dance, gymnastics, things like that, to a really high level that you wouldn't. I know I'm speaking generally here. Maybe this does happen in some schools in Ireland, but generally speaking, it's not something that you would see as often as I saw it in the UK. Now, I know other countries such as Australia and New Zealand and some other countries as well have PE specialists in primary schools as well. So what I'd like to ask, I'll start with Barry. Barry, would you anticipate that this is something that maybe would be introduced in Ireland in the coming years? And if so, what impact would you see that having on young people in Ireland?
Well, I suppose what I'd like to say is I'd like to see it happen, because I could definitely see the benefit in it. Like Orla was saying, I think it would improve engagement from the students, and also you'd have people delivering the curriculum who are more enthused about doing it and have a greater focus on it, and a specific skill set in how to go about it. And it's something that I think there's growing demand from the public in terms of getting this over the line. And I think there was a recent interview on Off the Ball with Micheál Martin, where back in May just of this year, where he was saying that increasing PE hours was doable. He was kind of pressed into making that very loose commitment, but it's something that hopefully we will see being introduced in the next few years, and whether it's redrafting the curriculum and then looking at how to deliver I suppose deliver this for prospective students who want to embark on their career as a PE teacher, then there's that time frame to do both at the same time while people are studying. The new framework can be drafted so that everything can just be rolled out, hopefully in the next 5 years anyway. But speaking about like what you were saying there, I actually grew up in the Middle East myself for a number of years, so I had that British school environment, and then returned to Ireland and saw the difference as a child, as a participant. And we used to have a PE class once a week, which would be athletics or gymnastics, dependent on being the autumn or spring. Then there was a double period also in addition to that, which would focus on games and different sports and activities. And then there was also an individual swimming class once a week, compared to what we would have here. I just found that there was such a stark contrast, and it's something that I personally felt would have been a huge benefit in carrying on at that kind of level, because you get so much exposure to different activities, different sporting disciplines, and just it also makes it more, I suppose, more of a regular occurrence that you are engaging in physical activity from a young age, and then you would hope then that would transition throughout your life into adulthood. And so yes, I would say hopefully with the introduction of Leaving Cert PE, we're starting to see those perceptions change, whereby people are taking physical activity, especially in school settings, seriously. And with that, we'll hope to see a greater number of specialized PE teachers delivering, and also that will trickle down throughout the age groups as well.
Yeah, and just staying with yourself for a moment, Barry, if we don't have primary school, specialist PE teachers in the coming years, do you think there would be any way we could, look to improve the quality of PE in Ireland? So is there anything we could do to qualify primary teachers that aren't necessarily specialising in PE, but is there anything we could do, maybe a bit of external training, maybe, including sports clubs, including parents, even in the, the education of physical activity? Is there any ideas you'd have that could maybe just, just increase the quality of primary school PE?
Absolutely. I was only recently speaking to the principal in my own children's school, and I was asking him from a school's perspective, what are the challenges that they face? And he was saying it's not even necessarily the lack of staff, but it's the time is the issue. So what they're looking at doing is possibly introducing more after school clubs and affiliating themselves, like you said, with external sporting bodies, and also perhaps having parents come in and do more activities with the kids as well, and also educating the parents, and hopefully just really sending home that message that this is something that we need to address now, because the challenges that we're going to face in the future are going to be far more I suppose serious than they are now, and it's definitely something that needs to be looked at. And as we've seen, I suppose, with the Joe Wicks style of delivery, there are resources for existing schools and teachers who might not be comfortable or might not have the knowledge or skill set in order to comfortably deliver PE classes. But there are resources online that they can use now, and with I suppose us all living in a digital age, that's something that can definitely be brought into the classroom environment, and it doesn't necessarily have to be delivered by the teacher in the room.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with that. Yeah, Barry actually mentioned the Leaving Cert PE there a couple of months ago. So Orla, I'm going to throw this one over to yourself. In terms of Leaving Cert PE, what impact do you think the fact that PE has now been introduced as a Leaving Cert subject, what impact do you see that having on A, the students, and B, just the general standard of PE being delivered in schools in Ireland now going forward? Because I mentioned before, a lot of the times when I was doing PE as a student, it was throw a ball and just play football, where wouldn't necessarily cut it anymore at all. You know, if it's a serious leaving cert subject. So what impacts do you think this change will have on the quality of PE being taught to the students in general?
Yeah, I think it's going to have a fantastic impact. You know, it's, I suppose, just that kind of focused approach as well. And I think like it's only fair really, because if you're good at music and you're good at art, you get to express that ability and talent in an examination. So, you know, it's great to see the Leaving Cert PE curriculum coming in. And like, to be honest, I just think that whole notion of like physical literacy is so important. And I think it will really bring more of an appreciation for deeming physical activity, deeming PE as important. And, you know, just because you're good at maths, like you should be just as physically literate as well. I think that's going to change the kind of, I suppose, perceptions and also the paradigms kind of around PE in Ireland, and really just there'll be a positive shift. And I do think that it will increase, you know, obviously the numbers in terms of PE teaching in Ireland, and the interest there will be phenomenal, and it'll be a positive kind of knock-on effect from this. And I think really, again, it just comes, it boils back to just having that kind of physical literacy and empowering, you know, the students to be actually knowledgeable and confident and motivated. And it definitely will have that spiral effect, you know, coming into college. And like, I do think even having it as the Leaving Cert, it's almost like a precursor course to, you know, delving into specializing in PE in college as well. And I think it's gonna, like, you know, it's fantastic to have at Leaving Cert level, and, you know, hopefully that'll trickle down, you know, even to junior cert, to primary school, and even, you know, early years as well, that it will have that knock-on effect, and that young girls and boys will actually strive to say, well, I'm going doing PE as an exam subject, and because I deem it important and I appreciate PE, and, you know, I want to have that lifelong physical activity environment, and I want to promote that as well. So I do think it's going to have a really, really positive impact, even in terms of the contemporary issues, you know, in Ireland too, like gender, the media, the technology, like things that are actually personally relevant to young people in this day and age. Like, even from my own experience, the 2020 campaign was phenomenal, and it really, you know, I suppose raised the bar for women in sport, through media and sport, you know, technology, even just the gender in sport. And I think, like, even, I don't know, or was anybody watching the All-Ireland ladies football final last weekend, but like, it was so powerful to see men, like young men in the crowd with the Mead, like Mead and Dublin ladies jerseys on them, and supporting women in sport. And I think, you know, having that Leaving Cert PE will definitely have that positive spiral, just in terms of like promoting it and deeming it as important in society, and for that lifelong physical activity as well.
Kick it on a little bit, because I am aware that we're running a little bit tight on time, so I'm actually just going to kick it straight on to the pathways into PE teaching, because I have seen a couple of questions coming in about, you know, clearly it's great to see some people are clearly interested in this as a future career. So just to discuss, you know, pathways into PE teaching, I'm going to just open this one to you, Barry. So could you talk a bit about pathways into PE teaching? So, you know, if somebody wants to go down that road, what avenues are available to them?
Well, there's a number of pathways at present in Ireland, and obviously we deliver our own BA in physical education over 3 years. And what this does, it allows you to explore the theoretical and practical side of things, and then maybe, if you wish, continue on to do the PME as well. So that's the Professional Masters in Education, to become a fully qualified PE teacher. And then there are teachers as well. I can see in some of the comments here, there are existing teachers who wish to add the necessary modules to go and apply successfully to the PME as well. And there's so many different pathways. And as you've seen yourself, Anthony, and from my own experience, that you can always meander from what you started off doing and make your way here. And I've seen a lot of students that we've had over the years. They've come from so many different backgrounds starting off. some are only making this transition later on in life, or some have gone and done an undergrad or certs in other colleges. We have partners with other colleges as well who can join in on advanced entry as well. So there's always different options for people to then progress onto that career path, hopefully.
Yeah, excellent, great stuff, Barry. And hopefully that has answered quite a few questions coming in the comments as well. I haven't had a chance to read through them in depth yet, but I know there was quite a few questions coming in about pathways into PE teaching. So I think that will have certainly touched on a bit from a Portobello perspective. And yeah, guys, as I said, I'm a bit conscious of time now because we're coming to 5 to 8. So I'm going to give the final question to Orla as our guest speaker. So Orla, you did mention at the start how you described all about the research you've done in the past. So just to finish up, what I'd like to ask is, from the research you've carried out and obviously the huge experience you have in the field of PE and physical activity, what do you feel are the biggest gaps in the research out there at the moment in PE?
I suppose, there's a lot of research out there in terms of like the children's perceptions and the children's, experiences of PE at primary and secondary. But I suppose, something I'd like to see more of, I think, would be like that kind of the teacher training kind of side to it, and their kind of competency, knowledge and how they're actually getting on at primary and secondary as well. There is some research in Ireland, delving into that as well. But I do think that just that education, like knowledge is power at the end of the day. And I think, perhaps there is a lack of, specific training for, particularly primary school teachers, that in terms of PE and the provision of PE in primary school. And like you do kind of have to ponder some questions. Like, primary school teachers are expected to be experts in 20 plus subjects, including PE. They're not going to be able to master all of them. Are they confident at teaching PE? What are the barriers there? What are the motivators there in terms of the teacher perspective as well? I think, maybe to delving into that side of the research would be very powerful. And, perhaps, do we need more opportunities in schools to look at that continuous professional development? I just know from my own research, like that's just particularly in the community-based setting, as well as the teachers in school, just that kind of confidence level, and that kind of, not sure. We all know we're going to do more of what we're good at and what we're confident in doing. So I would like to see that confidence side looked at more. And I think obviously with the COVID pandemic and stuff as well, I'm sure there'll be research in the coming years looking at kind of knock-on effects and the consequences of, the online learning and student engagement and attitudes towards PE too. So that'll be interesting, in the next year or two to see some research kind of develop along that area too, and within the Leaving Cert PE as well. So at the end of the day, research is a powerful tool, and it can go a long way to make positive changes in schools and kind of at a community sport based level as well.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant stuff. Thanks a million, Orla and Barry, but we're not going anywhere yet. I just want to spend a couple of minutes just going through a few questions. So if you just bear with me because I have to scroll down through them. I'll do them in order. So Tom, I know Tom asked a question there that I believe was answered in the comment section by Portobello as well. So I think that was answered clearly in the comment section. So hopefully that's cleared up for you, Tom. So Julia has asked, so here we go, it's up on the screen. So hi, I was wondering if any of you have experienced parents who have projected their desires to be somebody in sports to their children because maybe they failed in something. I was wondering if you have experienced something like that and how did you deal with it? I hope that's clear. Right, so I'll start off anyway. So in terms of parents that have projected their desire to be somebody, I wouldn't say I have experienced that as such. Now I have experienced when I was working in a primary school in England, I have experienced one parent in particular who wasn't happy that we were doing dance for a couple of weeks, and they were, kind of wondering why are they not doing football athletics, why are they doing dance? And obviously how I dealt with that was we just spoke with the parent and just explained the benefits of dance. We're talking about fundamental movement skills, the agility, all the ABCs that they were developing. So it was really just to inform them of the actual benefits of dance. It's not just, we're not looking to turn out the next Michael Flatley or turn them into professional dancers. It's about this movement skills that dance and gymnastics and activities like that can actually benefit. Now, I know that's not like specifically answering the question in terms of a parent's desires, because I just simply don't have experience in that regard, but that probably would have been the closest I would have had. But again, it was just a case of talking to the parent and, you know, making them aware of the importance of the importance of dance. So I'll open that one up to Barry and Orla if either of you guys have any experience in that field.
I wouldn't have any particular experience in that field myself now, but I can appreciate where you're coming from. I think the thing I remain focused on is that the curriculum and the program is designed to just enhance all aspects of the students' abilities and their appreciation and knowledge of their own ability, and also to improve coordination, as Anthony spoke about, say, for example, gymnastics and dance. Fantastic for developing coordination and just skills that are actually, in fact, transferable to more mainstream sports that parents might want, for example, their child to be involved in. I hope that might help.
Yeah, definitely. What about yourself, Orla, if you have any experience in that?
Yeah, I think, like, you know, as you were saying there, I think it's just the communication side of it. I think it's just so important. And, you know, you can't please everyone, I suppose, at the end of the day either. You know, I've experienced that through coaching on a community sports based level. But I suppose, you know, you do bring it back to, you know, the child-centered approach and the benefits, as Barry was saying, of, you know, why we're doing this activity, and that variety, that it's not just specific or like focused on one kind of a thing, that, you know, there's benefit to it, and there's a broader sense to it as well, that it's not just focusing on one. But I mean, you will have that sometimes, and I suppose that just comes down to clear communication and you know, outlining the wider benefits of whatever activity you are doing and whatever activity you're not doing or including.
Definitely.
I think
Orla,
sorry, just one more thing. I always think of the example of Rio Ferdinand, who used to play centre back for Manchester United and England, and his parents had enrolled him and his brother in ballet classes at a very young age to improve their footwork and coordination. And I think they attribute that to their fantastic movement. So
I've heard that a couple of top footballers have done it. I think Emil Heskey was another one who actually was in ballet. Now, some people could argue it didn't work great with Heskey, but quite a few footballers did actually do ballet when they were young. Orla, I'm just going to move on to the next question, which is from Michael Carey. If Orla has an outline of the week or a list of the challenges that she set out for the various days of the week, it would be great. So if you could even just talk through some of the challenges that you did, or maybe tell us where we could actually find the list, if it is up online somewhere.
Yeah, they're actually online, and they would be on the Ladies Gaelic Football Association. I think it's on their YouTube channel and also on Twitter as well. And if you go into my own page, it would be on the media section, my own page on Twitter as well. I can put my Twitter handle on the comments in a while. And again, it was just, you know, it's creative, kind of thinking outside the box, a bit of Tai Chi and stuff as well. So I can always follow up anyway, because I know with time and everything, I can always follow up with you, Michael, on that if you want more details on the different activities.
Yeah, great stuff. So great webinar. Thanks, Mary. Is there any contact details for Anthony, Barry and Orla for future information or questions? As Orla just said there, I'm sure the three of us can put in our email into the public comments here at the end. So yeah, just whenever we're finished answering the questions, we can just type in our emails, and I'm sure we'd be happy to get back to anyone who has any questions. And I think that might be most of the questions. Yeah, guys, I think that's everything. And like I said, we'll put our email addresses in here in the public chat. So if you just want to hang on for a minute, we'll put them in. And like I said, you can contact us and we'll be happy to get back to you. But basically, if I just say massive thanks to Barry Rowe and Dr. Orla Farmer just for sharing their experiences. I think it was definitely very beneficial to hear, particularly for those that are looking to, you know, go down the road of PE as a career. So hopefully you did get something from it. I'm sure you did, because obviously their experience is very extensive. So thanks very much, Barry, and thanks, Orla, and thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm sure we'll do one of these again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.